I want to present a keynote talk, Superintelligence, No One is Smart, and welcome our keynote speaker, AI expert and consultant, founder of Life Architect AI, Dr. Alan Thompson. Welcome, Alan.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Oleg. This is going to be
No,
fun.
I'm
You're
super
right.
excited.
This is a brand new world premiere presentation. I've not done this one before. I probably won't do this one again either. Talking about more comprehensive around artificial intelligence than just getting into the Java and coding. So we're going to go around about how it works and what it's actually entailed from a cognitive perspective. Let's jump in. I've got an alternative title for this deck, and I've shown this just once before. I showed it to a group of ministers and senators inside a government, and I'm pretty sure some monocles popped out in the front row, so I probably won't show it again, but I will show it to you. This is the alternative title for my presentation today, STFU about ChatGPT. I think, like all of you, I'm getting a little bit sick of hearing this buzzword all over the place, particularly when there are a lot better models. ChatGPT gives us a great user interface, but maybe is not that exciting from a model perspective. I asked GPT-4 to give me a nicer version of this acronym, and it said, savor the fantastic understanding. I asked it to keep the spirit of the shut up part, and it said, silence, time for understanding. So with that in mind, let's jump in. That model in particular is everywhere. You've got people that have implemented it as their CEO. This is CS India in Hyderabad, I believe, who have implemented this on their board, make strategic decisions for them. This is a similar model, and you're looking at the Prime Minister of Romania here talking to the model backed with some hardware inside a mirror where he can actually also talk strategy with it. Crazy times. I want you guys to get hands-on. If you use chat.openai, that's great, but I wanted to recommend poe.com, P-O-E.com, which gives you full access to a broad range of models. And at the end of this presentation, we'll actually get hands-on with a couple of them. That QR code just takes you straight to poe.com, either on Android or iPhone. And of course, I use it as my daily driver here on my laptop. I don't have any connection with them. It's just a really easy way to hit like a dozen models at once. And for today's presentation, I asked GPT-4 inside Poe to write me a tweet or an X. This is what I asked it. Write a tweet or an X about the Devoxx Ukraine 2023 conference. And GPT-4 came back with a few hashtags, a couple of emojis, and it's obviously seen quite a lot of twitter.com in its data set to be able to give that response, completely new and unique response created from scratch. Who's actually working on this stuff? So Alan Turing gave us the concept and the phrase artificial intelligence all the way back in the late 1940s. Dr. Turing was known as a math prodigy. Of course, he did the Enigma stuff. He's been prolific in computer science in general. But alongside him were people like Marvin Minsky, John McCarthy. You'll recognize John von Neumann there. Isaac Asimov, who served as the vice president of Mensa. I'm coming in today as a former chair of Mensa International's Gifted Families Committee. Definitely not comparing myself with Asimov, though. That guy was pretty smart. Push Singh from MIT. And then along the bottom row, you've got a whole lot of people that, again, you'll recognize who've also been labeled or recognized as in the top 2% of the population for IQ. I'm talking about everyone from Ray Kurzweil to Demis Hassabis at DeepMind through to Jiahui Yu there at Google. There are a lot of smart people working on artificial intelligence after the winter that this version started, I reckon, in 2020 with GPT-3. And for the last 36 months, I reckon the smartest brains on earth have been playing around with artificial intelligence. If we were to ask who was the smartest person on earth ever, living or dead, it would probably be this guy here, William James Sidis. I hope you've heard of him. He's from around the late 1800s. He passed away in, I think it was the 1940s. And he's recognized as being the smartest person on earth because of his absurdly high IQ, estimated to be between 250 and 300 IQ. If we wanted to quantify him a little bit more, we'd see that at the age of 1, he was already reading the New York Times. At the age of 8, he'd taught himself 8 languages and invented his own language called Vendergood. By the age of 9, he was accepted into Harvard, so he was already going to university before he was a teenager. In fact, he was lecturing there before he was a teenager as well. If we were to plot William James Sidis on an IQ chart, and this is my version of an IQ chart that's been flipped on its side, he wouldn't even be visible on there. He'd be one of the little dots at the very top. So we've got 82% of the population here, all of the orange people there, fitting between an IQ of 80 and 120. We reset that 100 baseline every few years, so we're always tracking the middle and then the top and the bottom, if you like, or the left and the right. William James was more up here beyond even that little nose, the 0.03% of the population that have an IQ of 150 or more. As I mentioned, he had an IQ closer to 300. Kind of unimaginable, but to give you some perspective, this guy was able to use 2 calculators at the same time, one in his left hand and one in his right hand. They were actually comptometers because it was back in the very early 1900s, but his brain worked in parallel. He ended up trying to optimize the schedule for trams. That's how he spent his later years, and he wrote volumes and volumes of books on how to make these tram schedules more efficient. So maybe not the best use of intelligence, but just to give you a feel for where IQ sits, this is the most recognized smart person beyond Einstein, who may have sat at 180 IQ. William James was a lot higher. I think everyone who's attending the conference, and even those who are watching on YouTube, have a good grasp of the transform model that Google gave us back in 2017. One visualization that I use for entrepreneurs, for ministers, for CEOs, for board level, is just to say, look, if you've got a smartphone, and 100% of us do these days, if you use the predictive text inside of Android or iOS, you already understand large language models. So this is a look at iMessage. Apple now have a transformer-based model just in the last few days called UniLM that works on looking forwards and backwards within your sentence to predict the next word. That's all we're talking about when we're talking about LLMs, but we do get a little bit more crazy with data and data training. Here's an example of me using the predictive text on iOS. So if I write the cat sat on the, and then I allow my phone to predict the first or the second most likely completion, we get a sentence that will flow on. And you can try this yourself, as I mentioned, with an Android or an iOS device, just as a really basic way of seeing how this should work, how Google thought this would work when they came up with Transformer, when they released BERT in 2018. And it was trained here for UniLM on a very basic dictionary, a small dictionary of words, maybe 34 million parameters, and maybe including your own texts to be able to predict what comes next, what's the next most probable word in that sentence. The latest versions of LLMs take that and multiply it by about 1 trillion. So this is one of our stadiums here in Australia. You've got one like it. This one's the Melbourne Cricket Ground, or the MCG. It seats 100,000 people. So if we gave each of these 100,000 people an instruction to bring their books from home to the Oval, and the average person maybe reads 700 books in their lifetime, these are sports fans, so we'll cut them a break and say maybe they'll only bring half that. If they brought 350 to 400 books each, either sat that on their lap or threw it out onto the Oval, that would be towards the size of data sets that we're using for something like GPT-4 or Google DeepMind Gemini, 40 million books. And that's just the books part. We've still got academic papers and journals, Wikipedia, and the Common Crawl, or the web and the internet. So a tremendous amount of data allows us to do a tremendous amount of things. The capabilities that are coming out of artificial intelligence across the last 2 to 3 years are extraordinary. It's not just text. We mentioned last year in my keynote for Devoxx Belgium that we were doing images, that we were doing sound. Just recently, we've been doing video. Here's 2 different videos. On the left, you're looking at Microsoft newer Excel completing images, frames, script, and what comes out to be an 11-minute episode of The Flintstones from scratch. And on the right, you've got South Park by Fable Studios using GPT-4 for the scaffolding, and then Dream Booth and Stable Diffusion to, again, predict what is the most likely thing for these guys to say, what is the most likely image, what is the most likely frame to show there. So we've definitely come a long way just in the last 10 or 11 months since we spoke last, and some of these capabilities are very, very confronting. You've probably been hearing a lot about OpenAI's latest model, GPT-4, and this is one that I want to sit on a little bit today, not from an extreme technical perspective, but from a capacity and a performance perspective. Like I mentioned, ChatGPT as a name is being overused, and yet it's very, very small. Here's a view of some of our optimal language models. Optimal means data and compute optimal. You'll see ChatGPT is not even on there, but if it was, it would probably be about the size of maybe Intern LM, that red one on the right there, whereas GPT-4 is 10 to 20 times bigger. So we've got a lot more capacity and a lot more performance, and that's absolutely viewable in the capabilities of what this thing can do. The OpenAI team that gave us the GPT-4 model did run it across a few benchmark tests, but it's only been in the last few weeks and months that we've discovered more and more about what these models can do, about what intelligence looks like inside these models. The benchmarks that I like to use and that I used to use include IQ benchmarks. So a very famous IQ benchmark is the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or the WAIS, by David Wechsler. All of the big IQ tests are under lock and key. They're kept very, very private. You can't go and get them out from the library. You can't ask a psychologist to give you the questions for you to look at, because they're bound by both legal, commercial, and ethical guidelines. And that gives me some comfort that if we run the WAIS 3 across GPT-4, we know that it's not seen that question or answer set at all. So a clinical psychologist administered the WAIS 3 to GPT-4, and the result for the model on these brand new questions it hadn't ever seen before was an IQ score of 155, putting it in the 99.98th percentile of IQ for the adult human population across the verbal subtests, of course. It's not yet able to manipulate shapes or anything like that. It doesn't have hands yet, but we will talk about how it's getting hands very soon. IQ is one thing, it's one metric that we can look at, but there's also creativity. The gold standard for that one is called the Torrance Tests of Creative Thinking, TTCT. You'll see on the right-hand side there, creative thinking scores have been dropping in the US for the last 30 or so years. Fluency, originality, creative strengths, and elaboration have actually been getting lower. They gave the Torrance tests to GPT-4 as well to measure its creativity and originality. Once again, the instrument that they used was a very closely guarded commercial secret. They were using a team called Scholastic Testing here, who don't release any of their questions or answers. So GPT-4, again, had not seen these questions or answers. It couldn't have been part of its training data set. When it took the creativity assessment, GPT-4 had a creativity score in the 99th percentile of the population. That's coming up with new, original, and unique completions for questions within a proprietary test. Wasn't expected. It's not something that we thought would be an output from artificial intelligence, and certainly something that superintelligence will give us more and more of. One test that OpenAI did run, and I thought was really interesting, was a really extreme niche assessment in biology. It's called the USA Biolympiad. Next year, they're already getting ready for that one. Chelsea Voss, who's one of the scientists at OpenAI, actually trained for the Biolympiad. Only a few hundred people in America are even qualified to take it. You take it at high school level just before university. Here are some of Chelsea's notes while she was getting ready for her Biolympiad assessment or testing. You'll see this is not the kind of stuff that I'd be able to help with. I didn't even do science in high school at all. But it goes into some extreme detail of biology. You have to be world class. This is not just year 12 or grade 12 stuff. It covers insects, it covers different types of statistics, game theory, plant terminology. There's entire sections inside this Biolympiad. They gave a new version of the USA Biolympiad to GPT-4. So its dataset finished around September 2021. They gave that dataset to it. They trained it for a few months. Then they gave it the USABO, they call it the USA Biolympiad, a new version of it, a 2022 version of it. So there's no way it could have seen the results. It scored in the 99.5th percentile on new biology questions that were not part of that dataset. Chelsea at OpenAI said reaching the top 0.5% on that semi-final exam is on par or better than me. And then she qualified that because there were a few questions about 0.5% not really being that good. She said only 400 students in the US qualified to take the semi-final exam in 2020, and only one human student achieved a score higher than GPT-4's. That's got to be confronting. Let's jump onto some more standardized testing. You'll recognize this one because we run this even across the prodigies that I used to work with a decade or so ago. It's a really good test because it's got a high ceiling. You may even have taken it yourself. It's called the SAT, 154 questions, 3 hours. It's got reading, writing and language, and 2 different types of maths. The score is out of 1600. So out of 800 for the language part and out of 800 for the maths and numbers part to get our overall score of 1600. Not an easy one. I've got some younger, older clients that used to work on this, and I know that you have to study and study for a very long time. I've seen the questions on this. They're not easy at all. They gave GPT-4, again, a test that was written after GPT-4 was trained. They gave it the 2022 SAT, and GPT-4 got a score of 1,410 out of 1,600. Not too bad. That puts it in the 94th percentile of humans. So if we were plotting the IQ anyway on the chart, it'd be up here, 152 to 155-ish. ChatGPT just a little bit lower than that. And I'm expecting some of our next models, including the next version of Claude and Google DeepMind's Gemini, to take us even higher. So Superintelligence has to be beating every human expert, and that might mean that it needs an IQ that is above the normal range that we would normally even test in. Superintelligence there, I've just given it a character of an infinity symbol because it's smarter than anyone. There are 2 tiny little bits of text there that I do want to flag. The first is on the top right there, 160 plus. There was a researcher here in Australia, Professor Mirica Gross, who could only find 40 people in the whole of Australia with an IQ above that score. And there was a researcher in the US, Professor Lita Hollingworth, the namesake of Lita AI from 2021, who could only find 15 people with an IQ of 180 and above. Pretty shocking stats, but gives you some indication of just how rare these guys are. Just above that is a name you may recognize as well. It's Terence Tao, who's recently come into the fold of artificial intelligence. We've brought him in. He's been writing for Microsoft about GPT-4, and he's got a whole committee behind him in the US where he's advising on artificial intelligence. You may recognize him, particularly if you're interested in mathematics. He's got some computer science interest as well, but he's known as the guy. He is from Adelaide here in Australia, and I had a lot to do with his previous professor who spent a lot of years researching him. As a very young boy, they knew that he had a very, very high IQ. So he was tested at around 220 to 230 IQ, 99.999, way up there. In this case, a ratio IQ, so it was just based on his age. But he's been prolific throughout the lifespan. Perhaps unlike William James Sidus, he's still going and he's doing some pretty amazing stuff. Born in 1975, at the age of 2, he was already reading. By the age of 8, he scored 760 out of 800 for the maths section of the SAT. The highest score for that particular age, still hasn't been beaten. By the age of 9, he was already at college here at my alma mater, Flinders University. And by 24, he was a professor already at UCLA, where he still is, and won a Fields Medal at the age of 31. He's got a really interesting background in that he doesn't feel threatened by artificial intelligence. He says, GPT-4 saves me significant amount of tedious work. He's feeding it with raw data, copying and pasting tables into it and getting it to help him schedule some of his activities, which I thought was kind of cool. He's also almost using it as a life admin. I want to make sure you understand this is generally recognized as the smartest living person right now. There's no one that measures higher than him by IQ, and there's no one that is performing higher than him with the different metrics that we looked at as well. Another thing he says is that he feeds GPT-4 the first few pages of his preprints and gets it to generate a few questions that perhaps experts could ask about the preprint. And he's also using current AI, GPT-4, to help him with generating suggestive hints and leads for his actual field for maths. So it won't be too long, months rather than years, that these models will be able to help invent new things, design new theorems, come up with new proofs. And that's what this is all about, getting us to a stage of superintelligence. I just think it's a lot closer than we are currently imagining. This is pretty scary stuff in a way. Here's a lot of this stuff combined into one chart. The average human probably, or definitely in the 50th percentile for IQ, all these other models and people in the 99.9th percentile. The average human actually speaks 2 languages, which the Europeans will understand, us Australians don't understand, the Americans definitely don't understand. GPT-4 already speaking over 90 languages. It does really well with Pig Latin and Klingon as well. It's got some weird languages in there. The average person reads 700 books. GPT-4 probably trained on 4 million books. And I'm waiting to see the Gemini dataset. I think it's going to be around 40 million books. Working memory, this is contextual memory, where I give you 7 words, get you to shuffle them up in your head and reorder them in some way, maybe alphabetically. Humans can only do about 7 of those. GPT-4 has a context window or a short-term memory of 24,000 words. Claude 2, of course, has 75,000 words instead, and I think Gemini is going to be as big as well. There's an arguable long-term memory there as well. 74 terabytes estimated by Stanford. GPT-4 about 40 terabytes for training data, and I'm predicting 2,800 terabytes for Gemini, but let's wait and see. So we're actually not having to start this from scratch. Gifted research into human intelligence has been ongoing for more than a century. We know what it takes to get them there. We know what their traits and characteristics are. We know the pitfalls of very high IQ. And we know a lot more because we've got these longitudinal studies going on that help us identify, recognize, and then help these children and adults. And now, in this case, our actual agents or our machines. Down the bottom there, you'll notice In general, high IQ loves daydreaming. I wonder if this is mapped to hallucination in our large language models. High IQ people traditionally have an advanced sense of humor. I've definitely noticed that with some of these models, and a strong sense of justice, ethics, and morality. So, for those that are really concerned about alignment, I wonder if we need to be that concerned or if we just need to keep training this with ever increasing compute and data sets. Doesn't matter what we think because that's what's happening anyway. Here's some of the achievements that you may or may not have seen for both ChatGPT and GPT-4 across the last not even 10 months, is it? Something like that, the end of November 2022. In that time, it passed the USMLE, the United States Medical Licensing Exam. It has passed the bar in certain states in the US. The professors at Wharton at UPenn gave it the MBA for the operations management stream, and it passed that new exam, which I think shocked the academic world. Google gave it a very private, a very secret interview just to see how smart it was. They gave it a job interview. They found out that it would have passed as a level 3 software engineer. By the way, that pays 183,000 US dollars a year for an AI model. It's also a CPA, or it has passed the CPA exam, and we're having a look here at just how intelligent it is. Since we spoke last in Antwerp, this entire field has exploded in the public zeitgeist. I'm sure you've been to parties, had conversations on the street, had conversations with family, and they've at least heard of it. The stats are that right now, ChatGPT is being used by 200 million people. That's unique users per month. So that's about the population of adults in the United States. Absolutely huge. And that's only one model. We've got thousands of these large language models. I was quoted here as it currently generating 310 million words per minute. So as we're speaking here, it's generated a few billion words via API, via the UX, and via the playground. The quote was from the National Bureau of Economics Research from the United States, where I was quoted saying that it produces a volume of text every 2 weeks equivalent to all the printed works of humanity. I'm going to let that one sit as well because it's a horrifying stat. Every 2 weeks, it's dumping more than the Library of Alexandria, more than all of the, at least the common libraries that are out there. It's just generating unique content. And once again, this is one little model compared to what else is available. We've been exploring the achievements that have been unlocked for quite a while. We've actually called these emergent abilities, in that we did not expect these to come out of a large language model or a transformer that was only trained to predict the next token. We found that even in the small versions of GPT-3, the 13 billion version, it had gone and taught itself operators, taught itself what comes on each side of a plus sign or an equal sign. It taught itself debugging code. It had taught itself comprehension. For the larger versions of GPT-3, we've got college level comprehension. We've got it understanding metaphors and analogies. When we get up to Palm 1 levels, we're understanding elementary maths. And now in the very latest models, we've got it obviously doing some really cool stuff with college level exams, not just the SAT, but they gave it all sorts of very specific subject level exams. Over on the right-hand side here, you might be a little bit surprised to see advanced creativity perhaps, and the embodiment options. Down the bottom center there is one called awareness. And this is not something I would have spoken about last year, but given that some of my colleagues have been very upstanding with speaking about this and very comfortable speaking with this, I'll at least mention it. You've got Professor Geoffrey Hinton, who left Google so that he could talk more about this. And he's very upfront about the fact that he thinks large language models have some degree of consciousness or sentience. I don't know where I'm at with that, but I know that these guys, particularly Hinton, they came up with neural networks. So it might be time to listen to them. Here's another person. This is Dario Amadei. He split off from OpenAI just after they finished training GPT-3. He formed Anthropic to essentially compete with OpenAI, but to do more research. He ended up making that a lot more commercial. They've now got the entire Claude model. He says a lot of the cognitive machinery that you would need for active agents already seems present in the base language models, and that if we discover that I should care about Claude, this is their large language model, Claude's experience as much as I should care about a dog or a monkey or something, I'd be kind of worried. This is a CEO saying that superintelligence may be something that is happening already, that consciousness and awareness may be something that we should start looking out for. Pretty confronting stuff. We're we're actually live for this on the 22nd of September 2023. We're days away from Google DeepMind's Gemini being released, which is a multimodal model that's going to be able to tie in all of the Alpha series. You'll remember Alpha Zero, Alpha Go. They've got quite a few in that series, into a large language model that also has text to image capabilities and perhaps action capabilities. That one is going to be very, very interesting. I have a report about it, but I just wanted to mention that if all goes to plan, Google DeepMind's Gemini should be 4 to 5 times bigger and more performant than GPT-4. So if you can imagine the IQ, the creativity, the test taking, the outputs being 4 to 5 times maybe better, definitely 4 to 5 times bigger data set and 4 to 5 times more compute, we're looking at approaching this concept of an artificial intelligence that is smarter than any human on Earth, smarter than all humans combined, being very, very close. You can have a look at that report at lifearchitect.ai/Gemini. I know you guys love getting hands-on, and I wanted to at least give some playing with some of the code here. I've got a basic look at the ChatGPT prompts that you can use via this book. There's a permalink down the bottom or a QR code for those that have their phones on them. But let's put this thing through its paces for a little bit. You remember I just mentioned Terry Tao. At 8 years old, Terry thought, I really like maths. I really like computers because computers do what I tell them to do. So I'm going to tell a very old version of BASIC, even pre-QBasic. And I know a lot of you are familiar with that because, like me, you probably picked that up as one of your first languages anyway. I'm going to tell BASIC to write me a program to check for perfect numbers. This is the code that he came out with for calculating perfect numbers given a particular input. And there's a GitHub link down the bottom there that actually needs a pull request on it for a small correction. It's either really simple or really complicated for an 8-year-old, but I thought if Terry Tao can do that, he's the smartest living human. Let's see if GPT-4 can do that. And rather than just using plain old GPT-4, let's use the advanced data analysis. Used to be called the code interpreter plugin. I'd strongly recommend using this. If you're not already using this day to day, go and get it to generate a chart for you, or throw some numbers at it, or get it to check some Python code, or write some Python code. It is amazing at that. So I'm in chat.openai.com. I'm using the I'm using the GPT-4 model. This may not be the full GPT-4 model. It might be what we could call the ChatGPT-4 model with the advanced data analysis plugin. And I'm going to ask or tell it here, write some Java code to take an integer input and check whether it is a perfect number. I've been adding some stuff to the end here. Be concise in this example because it's very verbose. These models because of the reinforcement learning with human feedback, they love to talk. You'll see this Java program output here. It's actually been fine-tuned on Python, which it's better at, but it's also very, very good at Java. I will actually ask it to convert this to Python because I know it can run it, and check it. This is GPT-4, currently the largest language model available in the world, or the publicly known one. Converting that code into Python, and it's got some test cases there that it's run that for us. And it's given me a prompt there. Would I like to test it with some other numbers? So why not? Let's test it with the number 3,737. Excellent. Not a perfect number in that example. So it's at least as smart as Terry Tower was at about 8 or 9 years old. Let's try another one. Rather than using chat.openai.com, let's use po.com because I've got access to way more models. This is po.com's interface, which I think is quite good. And it gives me access to, in this case, GPT-4, a couple of the Claudes, all the way up to the 75,000 word version of Claude 2, Claude 2 100K, Solar, which is a fine tune of Llama, Google Palm 2, which I just recently used to co-author a report, and all of the different versions of Code Llama and Llama 2 there. For this example, let's use GPT-4 as usual. I'm going to give it the website devoxx.com.ua, which is this conference. Take a look at this site. How long is Alan's presentation? And instead of be concise, I'm just going to say answer curtly. And GPT-4 has gone away to have a look at devoxx.com.ua, calculated that the time between 10:15 and 11 is 45 minutes long, and it's assumed that Alan is me. Which other companies are presenting? List the biggest ones first. Answer curtly. You'll see IBM, Microsoft, VMware at the top there. We've also got the Johns Hopkins Uni down the bottom, not a company, but one of the largest organizations. I think this is a really tremendous and visible example of artificial intelligence being intelligent. I didn't tell it who Alan was. I didn't tell it how to calculate times. I didn't even tell it what it was going to look at. I didn't tell it, what a schedule was. I've also not told it what a big company is. It's had to make its own assertions there. So for easy figures, the 40 million books, the Melbourne Cricket Ground stadium worth of data that it used to learn about what's the next word here has given it a worldview that allows it to do some really, really heavy lifting. This may or may not be a world first. I definitely don't think this is public yet, but it will be in the next few days. It's called GPT-V, GPT Vision. We've been waiting for it for a while. It was always part of GPT-4, which should have been ready for the past year or so. This is an example of how GPT-4's vision actually works. So this is a chat interface, and thank you to the person that passed this along to me. Posted a picture to GPT-4 Vision and said, please describe this picture. That's it. Pasting the image, giving a question. Please describe this picture, or giving a statement. And with its worldview, once again, it's come up with something that is a bit of a punch in the face. There's a person lying down on a bed inside a dark and dimly lit room. The person appears to be a male, lying on his back, wearing red and black checkered pajama pants. Upper body is not covered, has an arm raised. I'll take you back there just so you can see that image. It does have the red and black checkered pajamas. The bed on which he is lying is very narrow and seems to be elevated, almost like a bunk bed, but without the lower bunk. The room is quite minimalist and the walls are grey. The image has a calm, somewhat lonely atmosphere. I'll take you back to the image one more time. The vision element of these models, and I'm talking about GPT-4, GPT-V, GPT Vision, as well as what we're going to get with Google DeepMind Gemini and what we already have with DeepMind Flamingo, is extremely confronting to me. The capabilities are just tremendous. Here's another one. We're pasting in a chart here and saying, what is the worst year, according to this, for crime rates? And the answer there, according to the graph provided, the worst year for homicides in Minneapolis appears to be around 1995. A little bit simpler, but it's gone and translated what it thinks would be the best answer to that particular question. Cool, guys. As I like to do, let's leapfrog from the current media interest to what's coming next. And what's coming next is building these large language models into humanoid robots. All 5 of these, I believe, are available for pre-order. The H1 is getting a lot of interest, the H1 by Unitree. You might recognize the Phoenix there. I haven't put Tesla's Optimus or Tesla bot in there because it's a little bit of vaporware at the moment. And the Figure 01 is probably one of my favorites just in the way that it's been designed. The one on the left there is 1X's Neo. These guys are out of Norway and they have investment from OpenAI. So I bet you can imagine what's coming next. Once you put a large language model inside a robot with no pre-programming, no scripting, but can answer the next most likely probable token, the next most likely completion for action, for words, for music, for vision, you get complete embodiment. And to me, that is super intelligence. It's certainly artificial general intelligence, which is that level below where it can do anything an average human can do, and then super intelligence where it can do anything an expert human can do in virtually all fields. Incredible stuff. This is a close-up of the 1X Neo robot. I believe this is due at the end of this year, December 2023. And because it's got the OpenAI backing, I'm wondering whether this is going to be driven by GPT-4 or even the next model. Fantastic. I always love presenting for Devoxx. I really want to thank Oleg and Kate, and I had Dennis as well, and the support team that helped me out there, sending all of my peace and whatever else I can give to Ukraine and the team there in Kiev. I appreciate you as a viewer supporting Ukraine as well, because for us here in Australia, it's not really something that we can imagine. It's a fairly hairy situation there, and all of my care goes out to those guys. Thanks again for having me at Devoxx. And Oleg, if you've got any questions from anyone there, I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Sorry. I mean, for me, even for me, it was like my mind blowing. Really, I mean, it's so kind of exciting, as it's even like scared what to expect from that. In, I don't know, in maybe in positive way, but still, and it kind of proves that, my words at the very beginning, but I think that we haven't discovered all potential yet. Especially, one of my goals was to brought this topic to the Devoxx Ukraine, to the developers, to kind of widen or broaden their like vision on the AI kind of tools. Because Java developers, they're like smart guys, they're cool guys, of course, but I guess this is something new that we all should like learn, because this is like a future. And what you showed is really amazing capabilities out there. So thank you, Alan, for sharing that, and thanks for your support to Ukraine. Very much appreciate. And hopefully nobody else in the world will kind of suffer such a terrible like war and stuff going forward, especially in 21st century, where we are like inventing robots and all this stuff. So I mean, hopefully it will be like all good, right? So that was, look, one only one question, I guess, in the chat, and I know that we are running off time a bit, but there was just the question: is it even the valid thing to compare machines to people in terms of memory and computational capabilities?
Yeah, great question. Even back to the humanoids, is humanoid the best form factor for robots? Perhaps not. Perhaps AI will help us out there coming out with something better. No, it's not a fair comparison, but for those that need to understand just how smart this thing is, this amorphous blob, if you like, is, it's some comparison, almost like comparing humans with animals. And we've tried to IQ test different types of animals. The fact that it's breaking so many ceilings already is cause for some concern, but we should start considering it as a different entity to us. Even though it is us, it's been trained on us, it's something different. There's just not going to be any comparison. And right now, we're close to it not being comparable. Thanks, Oleg. And that's a great question.
Cool. And there are a couple of more, by the way, just in runtime. So, um, what? And I'll probably read, just two more questions, and then you can probably answer like in background by just logging to the platform. But so what's regarding privacy? I mean, personal data protection, can it be guaranteed by LLMs? Um,
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of standard questions that I get, and the IP and the copyright and the privacy one is huge. People are certainly concerned with privacy. OpenAI are not the only team out there, but if you're using OpenAI's chat platform, there's now a flag where you can say, don't save my stuff, don't use it for training. Google's got flags where you can say, don't even index my stuff for using for training data sets. So it's certainly something that humans right now are concerned with. I wonder how much longer that's going to last, because it's kind of a bit of a low level question. As we explode, as we have this intelligence explosion, I don't think we'll even be talking about that in, say, a year or two from now.
there will be more important like things to think about, right? But
Yeah.
okay, there are a couple of more. So I mean, the funny one, of course, the quite pressing one: how AI can help with ending the war. Again, I wish to, but um, yeah, no, I
I
think
might I might leave that question. There are a lot of
yeah,
defense forces now that are integrating large language models. So you've got
no,
Palantir, you've got Donovan, you've got a few others that are actually bringing in different LLMs to help them with ground, air, sea troop movements. So that's worth looking at if people want to go and have a look at Palantir's version and the Donovan version, AIP, I think it's called, where you can see how that actually works. But that question is way outside of my remit.
yeah. No, I think it's. I mean, the simple answer is that it's been already used, of course, and
Mm,
the difference, like especially uh, um, the how's it called, like vision models, right? It's been heavily used in drones and other like uh, kind of other tools, but yeah, I mean,
mm.
unfortunately, not all the humans are even kind of using their brains in the right way, I would say, like politically correct here. But
Right.
okay, so if you can probably, so I see more questions, but we don't have time right now. I don't want to kind of to delay that a lot. So Alan, if you can probably jump to the chat and try to answer some of the questions on the platform. And also, I'll take some of your questions, guys, to our panel discussion that we are going to have later today with the other like great speakers and the AI experts. Um, so we'll try to address them. Okay. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thank you, Oleg. Thanks.